Hello everyone, and welcome to the 102 Hours YouTube channel. Tonight we step onto a wind-swept Kansas plain where moonlight glints off dewy cornstalks and the hush of autumn feels deeper than silence itself. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and local time in the comments so I know where you're joining from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a gravel lane toward the humble Clutter farmhouse, your footsteps muffled by layers of fallen leaves swirling in the gentle October breeze. The sky overhead blazes with a harvest moon, its pale light turning the farmers' fields into ghostly waves. In 1924, true crime magazines like True Detective first captured America's fascination by printing lurid accounts of gruesome murders, yet nothing in those pulpy pages prepared you for the shock that would ripple through Holcomb on this very night. It's October 15, 1959, a date that will forever fracture the community's sense of safety. The Clutters are neighbors you've known all your life, Herbert's booming laugh echoing from the barn, Bonnie's floral dresses brightening farmhouse windows, Nancy's shy wave as she cycles home from school, and young Kenyon chasing his dog across the yard. Their white-painted house, trimmed in green, sits against a backdrop of rustling corn and towering maples. Smoke curls lazily from the chimney, carrying the promise of lamb stew and fresh bread cooled on the windowsill. You pause at the gate, hands brushing the cool metal, and notice how still the night has grown. Only the distant hoot of an owl and the chime of a lone church bell break the calm, and yet, something feels off. Maybe it's the way the porch light flickers too slow, or how the dog's silhouette stretches unnaturally across the lawn. Fringe whispers among late-night radio listeners claim Bonnie kept every stray cat, and local lore insists you can hear mewing from the barn loft at the stroke of midnight. Of course, no one's ever proven that, but the image lodges in your mind like a shard of broken glass. Inside, the family's warm lamplight should ward off any dread, but you sense a tension invisible in daylight. Historians still argue whether small-town homicides reveal cracks in post-war American optimism or stand as isolated, unpredictable aberrations. Whatever the truth, nothing in Holcomb's peaceful history prepared its 2,000 residents for steel-cold violence to storm the front door. You peer through the screen, spotting Nancy's bedroom window adorned with lace curtains and a collection of pressed wildflowers, her nightly ritual. A few steps farther, the barn door's loose hinge creaks in the breeze, though no one's been near in hours. You imagine Herbert's prized Holsteins lowing in the stalls, unaware of the terror creeping closer, and you swallow hard as you recall hearing that Herbert once joked he'd trust his life to God rather than lock his back door. A quirky testament to his faith in neighborliness, until faith proved dangerously misplaced. Your chest tightens as you hear a soft snap, like a boot heel breaking a twig. You spin, heart pounding, and catch sight of a shadow sliding across the farmhouse's east wall. Was it a trick of moonlight, or something darker stalking these hallowed fields? In 1954, the dramatic trial of Jack Ruby showed how a single impulse could rewrite history's headlines. Tonight, you wonder whether a single wrong decision is about to forever rewrite this family's fate. You step onto the sagging porch and your fingertips graze the rough wood of the front railing, worn smooth by years of Bonnie's careful touch. She was known to adorn this rail with tiny gourds each autumn, a friendly signal that the harvest season had arrived. Fringe bloggers have speculated that the arrangement mirrored arcane Celtic patterns, an unproven but persistent rumor suggesting the Clutters invited blessings from unseen forces. Beneath the hum of cicadas, though, you feel only the gathering hush of dread. Inside, the oil lamp by the radio casts dancing shadows across wallpaper patterned with yellow daisies. The dial is tuned to a late-night jazz program, its mellow trumpet notes drifting through the parlor. In 1959, FBI behavioral profiling was still in its infancy. Agents relied on witness statements and crime scene photos rather than detailed psychological maps. Tonight, those rudimentary methods will be tested by a crime so brutal that federal agents will be called in for the first time on a Holcomb homicide. You imagine Nancy perched on a straight-backed chair, her hands fluttering over a copy of Gone with the Wind while Kenyon stacks mismatched toy tractors on the rug. Herbert might be in his study, leafing through grain price charts with meticulous care, while Bonnie hums as she folds freshly laundered tablecloths. In any other town, such a scene would feel timeless and secure. Here, on this fragile October night, it stands as an unwitting tableau, soon to be forever frozen at the moment before catastrophe. The doe-eyed porch sways in the breeze, its chains jangling like a warning bell. You remember that eerie rattling when the barn door shifted earlier. A late-arriving handyman once swore he saw footprints leading from the fields toward the house, oversized boots imprinted in the soft earth, a detail he shared with little more than a smirk. Some skeptics dismiss his tale as rural bravado, but you tuck that image away, like a snapped twig in your pocket. You draw a slow breath, tasting the crisp hint of wood smoke and fallen leaves, aware that this tapestry of domestic contentment will soon unravel. If the Clutters had locked their doors that night, might they still be alive? Historians still argue whether forewarning signs, stray boots, flickering lamps, could have thwarted the killers, or whether fate had already sealed the family's doom. Lightning bugs drift like embers around the porch, their glow offering a fleeting comfort. You lift your hand to touch one, but it darts away, leaving only starry pinpricks against the inky sky. A sudden gust rattles the screen door, your pulse skips as the latch gives a faint click. This close, you can hear Bonnie arranging flower vases in the hallway, her humming staccato and gentle. You step forward, every nerve alight. In a moment, that hum will be swallowed by silence, and Holcomb will awaken to a horror its tidy streets never imagined. The hush returns, deeper than before. You stand on the threshold, toes brushing the worn doormat. Behind you, the night waits, vast, unblinking, and patient. Ahead, the warm glow of the Clutter home beckons, a beacon of normalcy about to shatter. And as you cross that line into the parlor's soft lamplight, you know there's no turning back. You push open the screen door and step into a warm glow that spreads across the tidy living room like welcome sunshine. The scent of cinnamon rolls still lingers, mingling with the soft hum of the parlor radio playing Perry Como's smooth croon. In 1959, such homegrown broadcasts were as much a part of small-town life as the county fair. By the mid-20th century, radio had become the nation's hearth, knitting communities together through shared news and songs. Here, at the heart of Holcomb, you find Herbert and Bonnie Clutter, figures so woven into daily life that their kindness feels elemental, like the Kansas wind rustling golden cornfields. Herbert is a tall man whose handshake carries the solid certainty of a seasoned farmer. You recall seeing him at the Pratt County Fair last summer, leaning over the prize-winning Holstein he bred, his broad shoulders framed by blue denim and straw hat. He served on the local school board and led Sunday services at the Methodist Church, his booming baritone inviting weary souls to stand, sit, and pray in turn. Historians still argue whether community leadership in rural America faded before the industrial boom or remained resilient through mid-century challenges, but here Herbert embodies the classic Midwestern ideal, a provider whose word carried weight, whether settling a barnyard dispute or advising on grain prices at the co-op. Bonnie Clutter moves through the room with a mother's quiet grace, her floral dresses unwrinkled even after long days of cooking and caring. You notice a delicate locket around her neck, rumored in fringe circles to contain a lock of hair from her grandmother, a Victorian-era talisman meant to safeguard family bonds. While no one's ever confirmed that she carried such an heirloom, the story circulates in hushed whispers at church potlucks, that Bonnie believed in ancestral blessings and tucked tiny charms into her apron pocket to ward off misfortune. It's a quirky detail that underscores how rural faith often blends piety with personal ritual. You imagine Bonnie's morning routine, up at dawn to light the oil lamps, set the table with polished silverware, and knead dough for her famous rolls. In local lore, her cinnamon swirl recipe was said to be so tantalizing that neighbors would arrive unannounced for a taste, joking that the aroma carried further than the church bell's peal. In truth, families across Kansas cherished such small comforts after the Dust Bowl decades, a time when flour shortages made a home-baked treat feel like a miracle. Bonnie's kitchen was more than a cooking space, it was a gathering ground where worries dissolved in butter and sugar. Around you, the parlor is a gallery of memorabilia, black and white photographs of Nancy's violin recital, a wooden rack holding Kenyon's model tractors, and a handmade quilt draped over the sofa, its patches stitched with Sunday school verses. You trace the quilt's stitches, recalling that quilting circles once served as both creative outlet and social forum for women in the 19th century, long before needlecraft became a valued art form. Historians still argue whether such communal crafts fostered early feminist networks or simply perpetuated domestic hierarchies, but here the quilt speaks to shared labor and shared stories, each square a testament to family unity. Nancy Clutter's portrait hangs above the mantel, a poised teenager in a crisp white dress, her gaze steady and warm. She plays first chair in the school orchestra and volunteers at the county library on Saturdays, typifying the all-American girl woven into Edie Sedgwick pulp novels and church newsletters alike. Fringe rumors once claimed Nancy kept a secret diary filled with poems about moonlight and lost love, a tantalizing but unsubstantiated myth that paints her as a literary dreamer. You almost believe it, given her thoughtful smile and the way she pauses to organize library volumes by height rather than by author. Kenyon's corner reveals a sandbox and a scattering of toy soldiers, his laughter captured in a sepia-tinted snapshot as he chases the family dog, Laddie, across the lawn. In rural childhood lore, dogs like Laddie were often christened with heroic names to inspire brave play, think Rin Tin Tin or Shep from old movie serials. Some locals swear they heard Kenyon calling out commands to Laddie in perfect imitation of those cinematic heroes. It's a fringe detail that underscores how even the youngest Clutters absorbed a patchwork of American pop culture, from film reels to dime novels. You step toward the window and gaze out at the barn where Herbert tended his cattle. The crimson paint still gleams despite years of sun and rain. He once led spring planting demonstrations there, teaching neighbors how to calibrate seed drills for optimal yield, an early extension of cooperative farming networks that had grown nationwide since the 1930s. This hands-on generosity cemented his reputation as a man who shared not just produce but expertise. Inside again, you notice a ledger on Herbert's desk, lines of numbers meticulously entered in his bold hand, records of monthly expenses, seed purchases, and utility bills. Farming families have tracked such ledgers for centuries, even before double-entry bookkeeping revolutionized agricultural finance in the 18th century. Historians still argue whether these manual records were more reliable than early computerized systems, but here Herbert's ledger symbolizes trustworthiness. If anyone's finances could be examined and found sound, it was his. As you move through the house, Bonnie's voice drifts from the pantry, humming a hymn as she straightens canned goods on the shelves. You imagine her childhood singing around a piano in St. Louis, a training that later led her to direct the Methodist choir. Her daughter's exceptional musical talent likely sprang from those Sunday rehearsals, one of many points where domestic ritual crossed into communal service. It's a mainstream testament to faith's role in daily life, yet it also nods to the subtle ways personal skills anchored small-town identity. You pause at a family Bible laid open on a side table, its pages edged with pressed flowers and handwritten notes. In many homes of the era, Bibles doubled as family chronicles, recording births, weddings, and deaths in neat script. Fringe enthusiasts claim that Bonnie added her own gloss in the margins, noting passages that spoke to forgiveness and grace, an unsourced but persistent touch that echoes the kindness she embodied. Whether true or not, the image captures the Clutter's ethos, a belief that faith, like family, required continual tending. Near the back door, a bulletin board bristles with community notices, church supper dates, 4-H meeting reminders, and an invitation to the annual Pumpkin Festival. You recall that in 1962, the rise of television began to overshadow such local gatherings, but in 1959 Holcomb still thrived on face-to-face connection. Historians still argue whether television eroded rural communal bonds or simply supplemented them, but this board stands as proof that neighbors here relied on each other for fellowship, until that October night. You step outside onto the gravel path, the farmhouse's lamplight brushing your coat with golden warmth. In this moment, the Clutters are more than victims, they are living monuments to community, faith, and care. Their farm is a tapestry of service, each thread woven by Herbert's leadership, Bonnie's generosity, Nancy's artistry, and Kenyon's innocence. You take a deep breath of crisp autumn air, tasting both comfort and foreboding, aware that this portrait of harmony will soon fracture under the weight of a single, senseless act. Remember that hushed snap you heard at the gate? It reverberates in your mind now, an echo of violence waiting to intrude upon domestic peace. And as you stand beneath the harvest moon, you realize that the very virtues that made the Clutters beloved have also made their tragedy all the more shocking and unforgettable. You push open the screen door and step into a warm glow that spreads across the tidy living room like welcome sunshine. The scent of cinnamon rolls still lingers, mingling with the soft hum of the parlor radio playing Perry Como's smooth croon. In the late 19th century, pioneering forensic photography began documenting crime scenes for analysis, changing how investigators captured evidence, a fact that would one day shape the way the Clutter murders were examined. Here, at the heart of Holcomb, you find Herbert and Bonnie Clutter, figures so woven into daily life that their kindness feels elemental, like the Kansas wind rustling golden cornfields. Herbert is a tall man whose handshake carries the solid certainty of a seasoned farmer. You recall seeing him at last summer's county fair, leaning over the prize-winning Holstein he bred, his broad shoulders framed by blue denim and a straw hat. He served on the local school board, chaired the grain growers co-op, and led Sunday services at the Methodist Church, his booming baritone inviting weary souls to stand, sit, and pray in turn. Historians still argue whether community leadership in rural America faded before the rise of suburbanization or remained resilient through mid-century challenges, but here Herbert embodies the classic Midwestern ideal, a provider whose word carried weight, whether settling a barnyard dispute or guiding budget votes at the town hall. Bonnie Clutter moves through the room with a mother's quiet grace, her floral dresses unwrinkled even after hours of folding laundry and tending the garden. You notice a delicate locket around her neck, rumored in fringe circles to contain a lock of hair from her grandmother, a Victorian-era talisman meant to safeguard family bonds. While no one's ever confirmed that she carried such an heirloom, the story circulates in hushed whispers at church potlucks, that Bonnie believed in ancestral blessings and tucked tiny charms into her apron pocket to ward off misfortune. It's a quirky detail that underscores how rural faith often blends piety with personal ritual. You imagine Bonnie's morning routine, rising at dawn to light the oil lamps, set the table with polished silverware, and knead dough for her famous cinnamon rolls. Neighbors joke that the aroma drifted farther than the church bells peal, luring them indoors even on the coldest mornings. In truth, families across Kansas cherished such small comforts after the Dust Bowl years, a time when flour shortages made home-baked treats feel like miracles. Bonnie's kitchen was more than a cooking space. It was a gathering ground where worries dissolved in butter and sugar. Around you, the parlor is a gallery of memorabilia, black and white photographs of Nancy's violin recitals, a wooden rack holding Kenyon's toy tractors, and a handmade quilt draped over the sofa, each patch stitched with Sunday school verses. Quilting circles once served as both creative outlet and social forum for 19th century women, a practice scholars still debate as either early feminist networking or reinforcement of domestic roles. Here, though, the quilt speaks to shared labor and shared stories, each square a testament to family unity and communal support. Nancy Clutter's portrait hangs above the mantel, a poised teenager in a crisp white dress, her gaze steady and warm. She plays first chair in the school orchestra and volunteers at the county library on Saturdays, typifying the all-American girl celebrated in post-war magazines and newsreels alike. Fringe rumors once claimed Nancy kept a secret diary filled with poems about moonlight and lost love, a tantalizing but unsubstantiated myth that paints her as a literary dreamer. You almost believe it, given her thoughtful smile and the way she pauses to organize library volumes by height rather than author. Kenyon's corner reveals a sandbox and a scattering of toy soldiers, his laughter captured in a sepia-tinted snapshot as he chases the family dog, Laddie, across the lawn. In rural childhood lore, dogs like Laddie were often christened with heroic names to inspire brave play, think Rin Tin Tin or Shep from old movie serials. Some locals swear they heard Kenyon calling commands to Laddie in perfect imitation of those cinematic heroes. It's a fringe detail that underscores how even the youngest Clutters absorbed a patchwork of American pop culture, from film reels in downtown theaters to comic strips in Sunday newspapers. You step toward the window and gaze out at the barn where Herbert tended his cattle. The crimson paint still gleams despite years of sun and rain. He once led spring planting demonstrations there, teaching neighbors how to calibrate seed drills for optimal yield, an early example of cooperative farming networks that spread nationwide after the agricultural reforms of the 1930s. This hands-on generosity cemented his reputation as a man who shared not just produce but expertise. Inside again, you notice a ledger on Herbert's desk, lines of numbers meticulously entered in his bold hand, records of monthly expenses, seed purchases, and utility bills. Farming families have tracked such ledgers for centuries, even before double-entry bookkeeping revolutionized agricultural finance. Historians still argue whether these manual records were more reliable than computerized systems that would arrive decades later, but here Herbert's ledger symbolizes trustworthiness. If anyone's finances could be examined and found sound, it was his. As you move through the house, Bonnie's humming draws you toward the pantry, where she stands straightening canned goods on sunlit shelves. You imagine her childhood singing around a piano in St. Louis, a skill that later led her to direct the Methodist choir. Her daughter's musical talent likely sprang from those Sunday rehearsals, one of many ways family rituals crossed into community service. It's a mainstream testament to faith's role in daily life, yet it also nods to the subtle ways personal gifts anchored small-town identity. You pause at a family Bible laid open on a side table, its pages edged with pressed flowers and handwritten notes. In many homes of the era, Bibles doubled as family chronicles, recording births, marriages, and deaths in neat script. Fringe enthusiasts claim that Bonnie added her own gloss in the margins, noting passages about forgiveness and grace, an unsourced but persistent touch that echoes the kindness she embodied. Whether true or not, the image captures the Clutter's ethos, a belief that faith, like family, required continual tending. Near the back door, a bulletin board bristles with community notices, church supper dates, 4-H meeting reminders, and an invitation to the annual Pumpkin Festival. In 1959, television's rise had begun to overshadow such local gatherings, but Holcomb still thrived on face-to-face connection. Historians still argue whether television eroded rural communal bonds or simply supplemented them, but this board stands as proof that neighbors here relied on each other for fellowship, until that fateful October night. You step outside onto the gravel path, the farmhouse's lamplight brushing your coat with golden warmth. In this moment, the Clutters are more than victims, they are living monuments to community, faith, and care. Their farm is a tapestry of service, each thread woven by Herbert's leadership, Bonnie's generosity, Nancy's artistry, and Kenyon's innocence. You take a deep breath of crisp autumn air, tasting both comfort and foreboding, aware that this portrait of harmony will soon fracture under the weight of a single, senseless act. Remember that soft snap you heard at the gate? It reverberates in your mind now, an echo of violence waiting just beyond. And as you stand beneath the harvest moon, you realize that the very virtues that made the Clutters beloved also made their tragedy all the more shocking and unforgettable. You slip away from the Clutter homestead's warmth and step into a darker American undercurrent, where two very different souls converge on a shared path of violence. In the 1932 Lindbergh kidnapping, federal agents first honed the art of cross-state manhunts and forensic ransom note analysis, laying groundwork for future investigations into crimes like the Clutter murders. Now, you find yourself tracking the footsteps of Perry Edward Smith and Richard Dick Hickock, the unlikely partners who shadowed the Clutter family's final days. Dick Hickock is the first to emerge from the shadows in your mind. He grew up in Kansas City, a town swelling with post-war optimism, yet his childhood was marred by an absentee father and a mother struggling to keep the household afloat. You can almost hear the hum of his family's flat-top radio, broadcasting big band swing, even as he yearned for respect and easy money. By his late teens, he'd amassed minor arrests for passing bad checks and petty theft, learning the hard way that local police watched him with wary eyes. Fringe accounts claim he once bragged about knowing safecracking from a brief stint at a traveling carnival, an unverified but persistent tidbit suggesting he fancied himself a modern-day rogue. Historians still argue whether Dick's early brushes with the law were juvenile mischief or the first flickers of a more sinister ambition, but you sense a simmering resentment in his swagger. You picture Dick in his uniformed plate glass office at Imperial Hot Rod and Grill, where he worked as a bellboy at age 19. He polished cars and poured milkshakes with a practiced smile, hiding a longing for a life of glamour he believed lay just beyond Holcomb's horizons. He told friends he wanted to join the flower-studded ranks of the Tonawandas or Hollywood's bright lights, anything to escape the humdrum of middle America bustle. That yearning, coupled with a fragile ego, would later make him dangerously susceptible to more radical ideas. Perry Smith enters the scene like an oil stain creeping across water. You first hear whispers of his childhood in the Pacific Northwest, an injured boy whose father fled when Perry was barely 5, leaving him and his brother to a harsh stepfather who abused them. He learned to read by flashlight each night, devouring books on maritime legends and medieval knights, dreaming of heroics he could never realize in a cramped Oregon trailer. By his early teens, he was crafting intricate sketches of shipwrecks and storm-tossed seas, artwork he later claimed reflected his own inner turmoil. Fringe enthusiasts sometimes point to those watercolor waves as prophetic symbols of the violence he would unleash, though no scholar has found solid proof of any supernatural link. When you lean closer, you see how Perry's world was riddled with institutional walls. He bounced through juvenile detention centers for petty crime, each stint eroding his trust in authority. Inside those cells, he taught himself knots from salvage tutorials, practicing until his fingers bled. That same craftsmanship later showed up in the bombs he meticulously assembled, his wire-twisting technique eerily precise. Historians still argue whether Perry was a calculating artisan of death or a disturbed soul lashing out at a world that had wronged him, but the evidence of his handiwork leaves no room for doubt. Dick and Perry met in 1958 at the Kansas State Penitentiary, an institution swollen with offenders like them, drawn from families broken by war and economic hardship. You can almost taste the stale coffee and prison-issue tobacco that filled their shared cell, a grim perfume pregnant with potential alliances. Dick, armed with bullish charm and a gift for storytelling, regaled Perry with tales of the Clutter's rumored wallet stuffed with cash, stories he'd heard from a fellow inmate. Perry listened in silence, his gray-green eyes reflecting a mix of skepticism and intrigue. That dusty tip about the non-existent money would become the kernel of their lethal plan. During the 1924 Leopold and Loeb trial, the nation watched two privileged youths challenge the insanity defense, setting a legal precedent that echoes here. Can upbringing excuse atrocity? Perry and Dick's bond bore a dark symmetry to that case, one raised amid wealth and dignity, the other in want and despair, yet both men embraced a delusional promise of easy reward. You imagine them hunched over a library card catalog in the prison's musty corridors, tracing the Clutter's name in microfilm and gleefully envisioning the payout. When they hatched their scheme, Dick's voice carried the promise of escape. He painted pictures of sunlit palm trees and beachfront mansions in California, just waiting beyond that mustard-colored horizon. Perry, stalwart and silent, nodded along, his mind already racing through possible escape routes. He might have drawn those routes in the margins of stolen notebooks, tiny arrows pointing toward dreams of freedom. Fringe accounts claim he once carved a map into a broom handle, though prison records contain no such artifact, another shadowy rumor that nonetheless fuels your uneasy fascination. They were released on the same day in late September 1959, stepping into Holcomb's autumn air like twin phantoms walking toward destiny. Dick procured a beat-up Mercury sedan, its fenders rusted but its engine ready. Perry gathered his handmade tools, wire cutters, pliers, and a battered suitcase that once held his art supplies. You tiptoe alongside them in your mind, the crunch of gravel underfoot and the thump of engines in your chest as they cruised westward. Inside Perry's cabin-like mind, you catch glimpses of an artist's anguish. He sketched the farmhouse from memory, each line measured in inches and degrees. He noted the placement of windows and the curve of the driveway. These weren't random doodles but elements of a blueprint for death. You sense his heartbeat echoing in every careful stroke. Historians still argue whether Perry viewed the murders as a grotesque form of artistry or a necessary step toward his liberation, but the precision of his drawings testifies to a meticulous, chilling purpose. Meanwhile, Dick rehearsed his role as the genial accomplice. He whispered of winning thousands of dollars, of buying a new hat and jacket, of moving to a swank apartment where no one would ever suspect them. Perry smiled at those visions with sad gray eyes, either complicit or too lost to resist. You wonder which, the man who clung to his art or the boy who never healed from his childhood wounds. Their contrasting backgrounds, Dick's hollow bravado and Perry's haunted introspection, formed a twisted camaraderie. Like the infamous duo Leopold and Loeb, they believed themselves above petty morality, convinced the ends would justify any means. In hushed bars and roadside motels, they refined their plan, trading quips and sketches beneath a neon haze. You almost hear Perry's soft laugh at one of Dick's jokes, the sound incongruous with the violence to come. Under a half-moon sky, they rolled into Holcomb on October 14, 1959, two strangers bound by desperation. You watch from the shadows as they park a block away, mutants in the sacred calm of country living. The wind rustles the cornstalks like a warning whisper. Dick checks his reflection in the Mercury's battered chrome. Perry glances at the farmhouse silhouette, his jaw set. The first act of their grim theater is about to begin. You feel the weight of every step they'll take, every stolen glance, every cruel decision. The Clutter homestead lies before them like a promise of reward, and soon, as you've already witnessed in Section 1 and Section 2, that promise will morph into unthinkable horror. But here, in the prelude to chaos, you see the human faces behind the crime, two men shaped by loss and longing, forging a partnership that would shatter a family's world forever. You sit in a dimly lit roadside diner just beyond Holcomb's edge, stirring lukewarm coffee as you replay the jarring news on the jukebox overhead. Ringo fought the law, and the law won. In 1959, that Rolling Stones hit hadn't been written yet, but the sentiment feels fitting for what you're about to learn. A hasty, faulty tip planted the seed of unimaginable tragedy. It was a tip worthy of true detective's most sensational story arc, yet this one came from a cell block rumor rather than a hardened criminal's confession. You watch steam curl from your mug, your mind tracing how a single misleading whisper would set killers on course for the Clutter home. In the Kansas State Penitentiary, Dick Hickock traded tales like currency. One evening he heard from an inmate recently paroled from Garden City that the Clutters kept $10,000 in cash hidden in a wall safe. That fanciful figure lodged in Dick's mind as firmly as a nail in wood, even though Herbert nearly lived in open-handed community finance, his grain receipts paid by check, not stacks of bills. French storytellers later speculated that the tipster was actually paid by Dick himself, a bonus for stirring vivid fantasies, though no prison ledger or testimony confirms such a transaction. Historians still argue whether the rumor mill in penitentiaries functions as reliable intelligence or as malicious misdirection, but here it proved tragically combustible. You imagine Dick's eyes lighting up at the parolee's words, the corners crinkling with excitement. To him, $10,000 meant a fortune, a ticket out of Kansas, a wardrobe befitting high-rolling gamblers, a new life under palm trees far from dusty feedlots. He whispered the news to Perry Smith during one of their nightly cigarette breaks, each puff curling into the chilly prison air like a spell. In that moment, Perry glimpsed a world beyond barbed wire, the promise of freedom bought with easy violence. Their shared dream felt as intoxicating as any neon-lit casino, a siren call after years of empty cells. In small towns across America, folk wisdom cautioned against acting on whispers alone. In the 1936 Lindbergh kidnapping, investigators chased forged ransom notes and false leads before zeroing in on Bruno Hauptmann. That high-profile case taught lawmen that rumors could be downright dangerous. Yet Dick and Perry, driven by desperation and a brittle sense of confidence, accepted the story as gospel. You lean forward, scooping sugar into your coffee, wondering if they ever paused to question the source or weigh the odds that their tip amounted to a fairy tale. On the night they were paroled, Dick and Perry met at a Greasy Spoon in Wichita to finalize their plans. You picture them hunched over a booth, the red vinyl cushions cracked and sticky. Dick unfolded a crumpled newspaper clipping showing an aerial shot of the Clutter farm, hardly intelligence, but enough to get them started. Perry traced the farmhouse's footprint with a finger, tapping each corner like a scout mapping enemy terrain. He murmured that the clip reminded him of the coastal cottages he'd seen in travel magazines, another fringe echo that no one ever verified. Historians still argue whether such macabre planning rituals reflect deep-seated pathology or mere showmanship, but you sense the ritual itself gave them a perverse thrill. The notion of a secret safe concealed behind family mementos captures the imagination. It's like something out of Prohibition-era gangster lore, when moonshine kings stashed cash in false bottom barrels. In reality, Herbert's financial records lay in plain sight at the bank in Garden City, under his own name, accessible to any curious neighbor. He never hid a dime beneath floorboards or inside antique furniture. But Dick and Perry, intoxicated by the tale of easy wealth, ignored rational caution. You feel the sticky tension of that fateful drive westward, highway lines slicing through the night like white-hot wires leading them to Holcomb. Before dawn on October 15th, they parked their Mercury sedan a short distance from the Clutter home, clutching stolen keys they'd lifted from a local hardware store. You imagine the mechanical click of the trunk latch and the metallic clank of the keys as they rounded the corner. Neither doubted they'd stroll right in, rifle through drawers, find that mythical fortune, and vanish before daylight. The very audacity of their plan echoes the reckless bravado of bank robbers who once donned masks to hold up small-town treasuries, yet here, no masks concealed their faces, only desperation masked their caution. As you step onto the farm's gravel driveway in your mind, you see two silhouettes moving toward the porch light. The hush of early morning drapes over everything, but inside burns the lamp's warm promise of bread and family. Dick leads the way, swagger in his step, eyes glinting at the thought of cash. Perry trails behind, shoulders hunched, his stomach lurching with guilt and adrenaline. Each footfall carries them closer to lives they never intended to take. In that instant, you recall the paradox of violent crime, that even the most meticulously planned acts unravel under the weight of human fallibility. The tip about the safe, as baseless as it was, became their North Star, and yet it pointed them straight to unspeakable horror instead of freedom. You taste the irony as you sip your coffee, how a promise of wealth can blind criminals to the value of human life. They reached the porch, the boards creaking under their weight. The screen door squealed as it swung open, and warm light spilled out like molten gold, so close to the phantom fortune they craved. But in that glow, they would find nothing but the Clutter family itself, and a grim reckoning that would echo across the nation. All because of a single, ill-fated tip whispered in a prison yard. You find yourself ducking under a low-hung neon light in a smoke-choked bar on the outskirts of Coon Rapids, Iowa, the pungent aroma of stale beer and Marlboro Reds clinging to your clothes. The jukebox rattles out a country ballad from 1958, "He'll Have to Go," its mournful twang underscoring the weight of what's to come. In Prohibition's aftermath, speakeasies had given way to roadhouse joints like this one, where gangsters once brokered deals over bathtub gin. By 1959, such roadside bars served as clandestine planning chambers for quieter, more insidious crimes. Tonight, Dick Hickock and Perry Smith occupy a scarred Formica booth in the back corner, their faces half hidden by cigarette smoke and brimmed hats, plotting the blueprint that will shatter the Clutter's world. You ease onto a nearby stool and watch Dick slap a stack of greenbacks onto the table, a makeshift down payment for Perry's cooperation. He grins, the motion splitting his face into eager creases. 10 grand, he purrs, echoing the prison rumor that started it all. The barkeep polishes a glass with a rag so threadbare it nearly disappears, and you recall how, in 1928, the St. Valentine's Day Massacre was allegedly arranged in similar smoky quarters, mobsters mapping Chicago territory with crayons on cocktail napkins. Historians still argue whether those napkin sketches sealed Al Capone's fate or simply fueled legends, but you sense the same mix of bravado and desperation here. As Dick leans forward, you catch the glint of a dime store ring on his finger, a trinket he once won in a carnival game. He boasts, just like glamour in Hollywood, though no photo ever substantiates his brush with fame. It's a fringe detail that some rumor mills love, that he wore the ring for luck, convinced it would shield him from harm. Perry watches silently, flicking ash into an ashtray so full it teeters. The two men huddle over a crumpled newspaper clipping showing the Clutter farm from above, an image so grainy it might as well be a ghost. Perry traces the outlines of the house and barn with a stub of pencil, his hand steady despite the wobble of cheap bar stools and buzzing neon. You lean in to hear their murmured exchange. Dick's voice is low and urgent as he outlines the plan: break in before dawn on October 15th, ransack the bedrooms for the safe rumored to hold thousands, and vanish before anyone notices. No witnesses, he says, tapping his finger against Perry's temple for emphasis. You recall that in 1934, the trial of Bonnie and Clyde revealed how criminals often scripted their crimes like stage plays, yet improvised under pressure. Here, improvisation is their only ally. They've never scoped the interior, they don't know if a safe even exists, just the lure of quick cash. A waitress named Mabel drifts by, refilling Dick's coffee with that slow, rattling pour that betrays decades of routine. You wonder if she suspects the danger brewing in her corner booth, but she's more preoccupied with her own troubles, raising 3 kids on a waitress's wage and avoiding her husband's late-night rages. Life in small-town Iowa rarely leaves time for suspicion. Mabel hums a hymn under her breath, another echo of domestic ritual, starkly contrasted with the conspiracy unfolding before you. Perry shifts, revealing a battered notebook filled with sketches of Gothic arches and cell partitions, remnants of his childhood obsession with cathedrals and confinement. He flips to a page where he's drawn the inside of the cluttered dining room, complete with table settings and chair positions. You see, he says quietly, tracing the angles with careful precision, we slip in here, move right, and we'll clear the bedrooms before anyone wakes. It's as if he's conducting an architectural tour rather than orchestrating a massacre. Fringe aficionados cling to the belief that Perry thought of the murders as an artistic performance, a grotesque tableau he'd later immortalize in watercolor, though no such paintings ever surfaced. Historians still argue whether Perry's aesthetic impulses drove him toward violence or if they were simply coping mechanisms for deep-seated trauma. On the bar's scratched countertop, you notice a lone pool cue resting against the rack. Dick picks it up, balances it on his shoulder, and taps it on the floor in a mocking gesture of precision. Our cue for action, he jokes, voice edged with nervous energy. You recall that notorious bank robber Willie Sutton once used pool hall recon to scope his targets, pool cues doubling as makeshift measuring rods. There's a macabre poetry to it, a tool of leisure transformed into a symbol of calculated menace. Perry pockets the pencil and folds the clipping, slipping it into his jacket breast pocket. He glances at his reflection in a tarnished mirror behind the bar, his eyes haunted yet resolved. You can almost hear the echo of juvenile detention hisses, orders barked by guards, footsteps marching away, and feel the weight of institutional distrust shaping his resolve. Dick slaps him on the back as if sealing a pact, and Perry nods, the smoke swirling around him like a halo gone bitter. You sip your coffee, bitter as the reality sinking in, this hastily crafted blueprint is all they have. No backup plan, no contingency for a safe that doesn't exist, no thought for the human cost. In 1949, the famous Kansas City massacre taught federal agents the hard lesson that small-town law enforcement could be overpowered by unexpected violence, prompting the FBI to bolster coordination with local sheriffs. Little do Dick and Perry suspect that their plan will backfire with far greater, darker consequences. A jukebox flickers to a rock and roll number, Roaring Twenties, and the bar seems to vibrate with its hollow refrain, a world moving faster than these two men can grasp. You stand, wiping a ring of condensation from your coffee cup, heart pounding at the sense of inevitability growing in your chest. Dick retrieves his car keys from his pocket, jingling them like an ominous soundtrack. Perry tucks his notebook beneath his arm, shoulders squared. You follow them through the bar's swinging doors into the chill night air, the jukebox's clatter fading behind you. In the parking lot, their Mercury sedan breathes steam in the cold, headlights off to avoid detection. They pause, exchange a final nod, and slip into the car's leather bench seat. As the engine sputters to life, you feel the ground tremble with the promise of violence about to unfold, an unsteady tremor echoing the unsteady blueprint they've drawn in a haze of smoke and cheap ambition. You take one last look at the roadhouse glowing behind them, its neon sign reading welcome in flickering blue letters. Inside, that booth will soon receive another patron, a sheriff or FBI agent chasing clues. But for now, it holds the ghost of a plan born in desperation, sketched on beer coasters, whispered over cigarette ash, and doomed by its own recklessness. You step back into the shadows, breathing deeply, bracing yourself for dawn's harsh revelations. The blueprint has been drawn. The killers are en route. All that remains is to witness how this fatal scheme will shatter the Clutter family's world beyond repair. You slip through the half-open screen door just as dawn's pale fingers stretch across the sky, the world awash in a washed-out gold that seems almost too gentle for what you're about to witness. In those final moments before violence erupts, the Clutter farm holds its breath, dew-glazed cornstalks shimmer like trapped crystal, the dog's collar jingles softly in the yard, and the faint scent of Bonnie's fresh-baked coffee drifts from the kitchen. In the early 20th century, before forensic breakthroughs like DNA analysis, investigators often relied on the smallest witness clues, footprints, broken glass, the scuff of a shoe, to piece together a crime scene. Tonight, every sound, every shadow, every broken twig bears witness to the shattering of a peaceful morning. You step onto the back porch where a single lantern glows, its light pooling at your feet. The board beneath your stride creaks in protest, echoing across the empty yard. Somewhere inside, Nancy's violin stands on its rack, a silent sentinel waiting for her practiced fingers. Kenyon's toy tractors lie parked at the door, tiny sentries of innocence. You recall that soft snap at the gate, the eerie omen you felt. Now that same snap seems magnified in the hush of approaching doom. Inside, the kitchen door swings wide as you push through. The table is set, a pitcher of orange juice sweating beside a platter of golden rolls, their cinnamon scent still clinging to the room. Bonnie stands by the stove, apron tied tight at her waist, humming a gentle hymn, her back to the hallway, unaware of the shadow about to cross her threshold. Historians still argue whether early warning signs, a flickering porch light, a misplaced tool, could have spared the Clutters from this fate, but in these final seconds, you sense the fragile divide between domestic routine and catastrophic violence. You slip down the hallway past the parlor, heart hammering as you glimpse Bonnie's back bathed in lamplight. She moves with that quiet grace you've come to know, sliding a fresh loaf of bread onto a cooling rack. The radio crackles in the corner, tuned low to a morning news bulletin, likely a report on the world beyond Holcomb, stock prices, a town hall meeting in Wichita, perhaps a mention of President Eisenhower's upcoming speech. In this moment, technology and tranquility intertwine, oblivious to the danger closing in. A sudden rustle behind the closed front door freezes you. You imagine Herbert stepping into the entrada, his strong hand steadying the screen as he greets you with that hearty laugh. Instead, the wood gives way in a muffled crash, the door splinters under a forceful kick. Light floods the hallway as the screen swings inward, and two figures spill across the threshold, Dick in a threadbare suit coat, Perry clutching a battered suitcase. Their eyes churn with cold purpose. Perry's gaze sweeps the room, locking on each family member like a predator sizing up prey. Dick cracks a grin, his charm now twisted into menace, and swings his arm toward the kitchen. You recall the smoky Iowa bar where they plotted this moment, tracing the house's blueprints on beer-stained napkins, none of which could truly capture a family's heartbeat at dawn. Perry's boots press rubber-soled footprints into the oak floor, Dick's leather loafer slips a perfect circle into Bonnie's braided rug. "Everybody, keep still," Perry says, voice low but unwavering. His manner contradicts his appearance, calm hands, precise words, like a surgeon before a dark operation. Bonnie spins, her floral dress fluttering like a startled bird. Nancy emerges from the parlor doorway, her violin case clutched against her chest. Kenyon trails behind his mother, eyes wide as saucers, clutching Laddie's leash with a trembling hand. You stand just to the side, watching the tableau unfold in painful slow motion. The killers move with mechanical efficiency. Perry strides to the hallway closet and yanks it open, uncovering a set of smooth wooden keys Dick had pinched from a local hardware store. He holds them out with a cocky flourish, as if they're a ceremonial prop. "Safe," he says, voice casual. "Show us where it is, Mrs. Clutter." Bonnie's voice quivers, "There is no safe." She tries to smile, but you see the tremor in her lips. Herbert steps from the kitchen, rolling up his shirt sleeves, the morning light outlining his stoic frame. Nancy clutches the violin case like a shield, an almost poetic gesture for a world about to collapse in violence. Kenyon hides behind his father's legs, his toy soldiers forgotten at the threshold. Dick's grin fades. He glances at Perry, then back at Herbert. "We were told," his voice trails, the unspoken accusation hanging heavy. "You recall the faulty penny ante-tip that lured them here, a single false whisper in a prison yard that became the spark for this inferno." Historians still argue whether that rumor was malicious sabotage or mere boredom, but tonight its consequences will drown out all debates. Perry steps forward, unfeeling hands reaching for the violin case. Nancy cries out, that frightened note cutting through the morning air like a violin screech. Herbert's booming voice fills the silence, "You won't take anything from this family." He moves to block the hallway, the dust motes swirling around his shoulders like tiny ghosts of justice. In the kitchen, Bonnie grabs a rolling pin from the counter, her knuckles whitening as she braces to defend her home. But this is no kitchen scuffle, Dick and Perry are beyond bargaining. With a swift motion, Dick grabs Kenyon by the arm, pulling the boy back with a strangled tug. Perry's fingers wrap around Nancy's locket, wrenching it free in a single jerk. You see that small heirloom clatter to the floor, its Victorian promise of ancestral blessing shattered under boot heel. The radio flickers, pulses in the background, as if straining to remain a thread of normalcy. Bonnie's cinnamon rolls grow cold on the counter, their sweet promise overturned by the stench of fear. You brace as Dick leans close to Herbert's ear and hisses, "We want the money." His breath smells of stale whiskey and regret. Herbert's broad shoulders stiffen, his faith in neighborliness upended by betrayal's cruelty. Nancy drops the violin case, it thuds to the hardwood with a hollow echo. Kenyon whimpers, curling into a ball behind his father. Bonnie's voice cracks as she pleads, "We have nothing hidden." You feel the fragile barrier between life and death thin, as morning light bends into shadows. Perry's hand sweeps across the mantel, toppling family photos like dominoes, Herbert and Bonnie on their wedding day, Nancy's shy smile at graduation, Kenyon chasing the dog through a summer field. The photographs spin into a broken carousel of happier times. In their faces you read disbelief, confusion, the tragic poetry of innocence abandoned. A sudden crash from the kitchen signals the final act. Is it Herbert's attempt to disarm his wife's panicked defense or Dick smashing cabinet doors searching for the phantom safe? The world tilts on its axis as you realize the raid has morphed into slaughter. There is no ransom, only the dark mathematics of evil unleashed. You back away, every nerve shouting to flee, but your feet remain planted. The room spins with shattered trust, the sound of glass crunching underfoot, the labored breathing of a family stripped bare. Outside, the harvest moon still lingers, its pale glow casting a silent witness across crime's aftermath. In that moment, you understand how quickly routine becomes ruin, the hum of a radio, the steam of coffee, the warmth of family hearth, all consumed in a heartbeat by unthinking cruelty. As you slip toward the back door, you carry the weight of unspoken horrors, the memory of that dawn raid etched into every fiber of your being. You slip quietly back through the splintered doorway, the morning light now fully awash across the hallway's peeling wallpaper, and your breath catches as you realize the house has fallen unnaturally silent. In 1941, pioneering crime scene reconstructions in Los Angeles taught investigators how to piece together events from broken objects and overturned furniture, yet here, even the most meticulous reconstruction can't capture the terror that unfolded in these rooms. You move from door to door, heart pounding as you recount how 4 lives ended in a hush so deep it might swallow the whole town of Holcomb. First, Herbert Clutter, firm hands still clenched in the air, as if mid-gesture, fell at the threshold of his study. You see him there in your mind, crisp white shirt stained by a single, clean strike. There's a smell of cold metal, faint yet unmistakable, lingering beneath the lingering scent of coffee grounds he never sipped. A fringe rumor whispered afterward that Herbert's favorite fountain pen was still clasped in his fingers, ink smeared across its barrel, an odd detail suggesting he might have been writing a final note. No such note was ever found, but the image gnaws at you, a man defined by words, cut off just as a page might. You pause at the doorway to the kitchen, where Bonnie stood a moment before, tilting her head to listen, apron strings looping half-knotted at her back. Now she lies near the stove, her floral dress fanned out like fallen petals. Historians still argue whether Bonnie's quick instinct to protect her children slowed the killer's advance or simply sealed her fate more swiftly. You crouch and notice her rolling pin, once a tool of comfort, resting beside her hand, its wooden surface imbued with the faintest trace of flour. It's a reminder that domestic implements can morph into instruments of tragedy in an instant. Moving through the parlor, you find Nancy's violin case lying gaping open, bow resting across its strings. She must have dropped it mid-step, caught off guard by the intruder's command. You imagine her high notes cutting through the dawn air just moments earlier, only to be silenced by a snap of the assailant's resolve. A fringe account insists that Nancy tucked a single pressed wildflower into her music stand each night, a quirk of teenage ritual, but when agents sifted through her room, they found only empty stems and scattered sheet music. The contrast between her artistic grace and the harsh reality of her end chills you to the bone. In the children's room, Kenyon's toy tractors remain lined up as if ready for another day's play, their paint bright against the dull carpet. The boy huddled in a corner, clutching Laddie's leash, the dog's collar lies discarded on the floor. You step closer and notice faint muddy footprints, tiny and delicate, leading from the hallway to that spot, as if Kenyon tried to escape before collapsing in confusion. There's the lingering scent of his shampoo, sharp and floral, mingled with something softer, fear, childlike and raw. Each room offers its own tableau of violence paused in time. You recall the crackle of a .22 rifle shot echoing off walls, the same caliber used in countless mid-century burglary cases, when police first catalogued weapon types to link crimes. Here, the echo became the voice of death, striking each family member in turn, leaving no call for help and no final breath to record. You trace your fingers along Bonnie's dusted shelves, knickknacks now ask you, as if convulsed by unseen force. A luncheon plate tilts on its rack, a chipped teacup cracked in half. You imagine a moment of frantic struggle, something that might have overturned those items, only to be swallowed by silence. It's a jarring reminder that violence can erupt in the meekest of homes. At the end of the hallway, you glimpse Herbert's desk, its ledger closed, pen resting atop the crease. You recall that ledger's neat columns from Section 2, every entry a testament to trust and transparency. Now those scanned pages serve investigators more as morbid chroniclers than helpful guides. A single drop of blood at the edge of the blotter, the only bodily trace they found in the study, proved crucial in matching the murder weapon, but it cannot resurrect the man who balanced those numbers with steady hands. In the parlor's corner, a child's faint fingerprints mark a window pane, Kenyon's tiny smudges, frozen against the glass. You recognize those prints from early fingerprint analyses pioneered in 1903, when the U.S. Army first cataloged them. Here, they testify to a terrified boy's final attempt to reach out. You brush your thumb across them and feel the insistent throb of a heartbeat that once pulsed through this house. You stand in the center of the living room, eyes sweeping over the silent victims. The harvest moon has set, leaving only pale daylight to illuminate what remains. You sense the weight of community grief that will descend upon Holcomb, a town unaccustomed to blood on its floorboards. You remember the dismantled concert hall in Vienna after a tragic incident in 1936, venues once devoted to harmony transformed into crime scenes overnight. Here, the Clutter home's melody of daily life lies shattered. With quiet reverence, you back toward the front door, steps measured and slow. Each room's agony lingers like an aftertaste, bittersweet memories twisted into horror. The promise of easy money, spun from prison whispers, became the catalyst for this massacre. You recall that faulty tip from Section 4, and you wonder if a single skeptical question, "Are you sure?" might have changed everything. At the threshold, you pause and look back one last time. The house seems to exhale a final sigh, newspapers flutter in the parlor breeze, a clock ticks in orphan cadence, and the muted daylight softens the edges of tragedy. You step outside, letting the door swing shut behind you, leaving the Clutter farm to bear its silent testament to lives ended in the stillness of mourning. You step out of the Clutter home into a town that feels suspended between grief and disbelief. Porch swings creak in deserted yards, and the distant wail of train whistles seems to carry the community's sorrow on its steel rails. In 1954, the sensationalized coverage of the McDonald's massacre in San Jose first demonstrated how media could turn a local tragedy into national spectacle, and by 1959 newspapers had only grown hungrier for headlines. Here in Holcomb, you witness that same transformation. Hushed conversations at the general store swell into front-page splashes read from coast to coast. Morning dew still clings to corn blades as you approach the small Holcomb Gazette office, its wooden sign swinging faintly on rusty hinges. Reporters drift through town like vultures, notebooks in hand, eyes scanning every face for a quote. You overhear one ask a trembling neighbor, "How did it feel to know your friends were killed?" The question hangs heavy in the cool air. Families cluster at church basements for whispered prayer sessions, wandering out only to scan the Chronicle's new edition, where the Clutter farm's grain silos dominate a grainy photograph. Historians still argue whether relentless press coverage comforts communities by sharing grief or deepens wounds by stripping privacy, but here the glare of flashbulbs cracks open Holcomb's quiet life. You wander past storefront windows plastered with headlines, "For Murdered in Holcomb Farmhouse" reads one, "Secrets of Clutter Safe Rumor" reads another, complete with a sketch of a mysterious hidden vault. Fringe forums peddle wild speculation that the Clutter barn's skeleton key was forged in a secret society's workshop, an unsubstantiated rumor that excites thrill-seekers more than reporters who race the midday deadline. You catch yourself drawn to one poster showing a hooded figure standing in the cornfield, captioned, "Real Killer or Phantom?" It's a stark reminder that tragedy often breeds tall tales. As midday sun gilds the dusty streets, you join a crowd gathered outside the Gazette. The editor, a grizzled man with ink-stained fingers, offers a public reading of new details, autopsy estimates, witness recollections, the FBI's confirmation of bullet calibers matching the suspect's guns. The crowd listens in hushed reverence, punctuated by the rustle of newspaper pages. You remember the hush inside the Clutter home after the raid, its echo now replaced by the rustle of print. Local radio stations jump into the fray, interrupting daytime programs to broadcast on-the-scene reports. "We're live at the farm," a crackling voice intones, where federal agents continue their search. The broadcaster's tone wavers between solemnity and sensationalism, a dance perfected since the 1930 War of the Worlds broadcast taught radio audiences how easily fear could be stoked by drama. You tune in, heart thumping as the announcer describes the shattered screens and the icy silence that greeted investigators, details you already carried in your mind like relics. In front of the Clutter house stands a lone photographer, kneeling to capture the scene. His camera clicks like a metronome marking the town's heartbeat. You see him step into the hallowed frame, the sun glinting off his flashbulb, before carefully framing a shot of the open door. That image will later appear in Life magazine, searing the Clutter farm into national memory. Fringe collectors trade copies of that photo on underground markets, claiming the light patterns reveal hidden symbols, a conspiracy whispered but never proven. Scholars still argue whether such images should be archived as evidence or archived as voyeuristic artifacts, but their power to define public memory is undeniable. Across the street, a makeshift memorial sprouts, bouquets of wildflowers placed in old mason jars, homemade candles flickering in mason-lid tins, and clusters of hand-lettered cards bearing simple messages, "Rest in peace, we stand with Holcomb, never forgotten." You step closer, kneeling to add a single sunflower you plucked from a neighbor's field, its bright petals a gesture of solidarity against the pervasive gray. The scent of lavender from another vase drifts over you, a fringe practice adopted from 19th century mourning traditions, intended to calm anguished hearts. Inside the town hall, survivors and church leaders convene a prayer vigil. You slip into a folding chair, the wood cool beneath your fingertips. A pastor's voice rises in him, amazing grace, its notes weaving through the hall's beams like threads of comfort. You recall how in 1884, prayer vigils after the Chicago Haymarket affair helped communities process grief, establishing a tradition of collective mourning that endures today. Here, too, the song loops through your mind as families bow their heads, each face lined with fatigue and resolve. When night falls, the television sets in nearby Wichita air special segments. Never before had small-screen broadcasts carried such weight in small towns. You huddle with neighbors around a black-and-white picture tube as an anchor recaps the FBI's statement, 2 suspects identified, massive manhunt underway. The flicker of the screen paints ghostly patterns on your walls, echoing back to those dance-like shadows in the Clutter parlor days earlier. Back on Main Street, hotel rooms fill with out-of-town journalists. Luggage wheels click against awkward flooring as they chase leads, interviews with former inmates who knew Perry and Dick, visits to hardware stores that sold keys similar to the ones used in the break-in, stakeouts at the county jail to catch rumors. You notice the humble oil station giving discounted fuel to press cars, another sign that tragedy has become business. Gas pumps become flashpoints for conversations, mechanics swapping theories between tire rotations. In your path you cross a brother of Nancy's best friend, tears brimming as he recalls Nancy's shy smile in the school hallway. You pause to offer a gentle nod, aware that simple gestures carry more weight now. Survivors share stories, how Nancy tutored classmates in music, how Herbert once covered farmers' loan payments for a neighbor down on their luck. These personal anecdotes oppose the chilly statistics on newswires, grounding the case in human warmth now scorched by violence. A late-night teleprinter in the Gazette's back room spits out updates, arrest warrants for Smith and Hickock, descriptions of their Mercury sedan, appeals for tips. You hover over the clattering machine, watching words roll like dominoes. The payoff rumor blooms into a nationwide manhunt, and every telegraph line hones in on Holcomb's coordinates. It's a familiar script. In 1935, the Lindbergh kidnapping vault sparked similar radio teletype chases, proving that technology amplifies tragedy's broadcast. You step outside into a crisp midnight air, fatigue tugging at your shoulders. The memorial's candles flicker, their flames as fragile as the town's shaken faith. You draw a slow breath, tasting both the acrid smoke of flashbulbs and the sweet scent of wildflowers. The world beyond Holcomb stirs with fascination and fear, while inside the town, mourning and solidarity blend into a tapestry of resilience. As you walk past the Gazette's silent typewriters and the echo of memorial hymns, you sense the media's dual power, to expose evil and to unite hearts. You carry that tension with you, between sensationalism and empathy, knowing that the Clutter murders will live on in headlines, in airwaves, and in the hushed memories of those who knew the family best. You step onto the cracked sidewalk outside the Holcomb County Sheriff's Office, the morning air still heavy with damp earth and hushed murmurs. A single flap of yellowed police tape snaps in the breeze, marking the boundary between local grief and federal resolve. In 1908, the Bureau of Investigation was born under Attorney General Charles Bonaparte, only to be reborn as the Federal Bureau of Investigation under J. Edgar Hoover's Iron Will in 1935, and yet shotgun murders on remote farms were still considered beyond its usual beat. Now, after 4 brutal killings and a media maelstrom that wrung every drop of shock from America's collective conscience, you witness Hoover's decision to deploy Bureau resources for the first time on a small-town murder. Inside the sheriff's lobby, the stale scent of linoleum mingles with the sharp tang of official files. You watch as 2 men in dark suits step through the doorway, one tall and stern, the other compact and precise. Their shoes catch the overhead fluorescence, polished to a mirror sheen, the hallmarks of G-men trained to stamp out crime with uniform confidence. You recall the jittery tipsters you saw at the diner, their whispered rumors of hidden safes and phantom shadows. Now you see instead the slow, deliberate gaze of these agents, turning every whispered lead into a ledger entry. A fringe rumor later circulated that Hoover dispatched a secret psychic unit alongside them, a bizarre tale of dowsing rods and seances to locate weapons buried in the fields, though no official record acknowledges such a spectral sidecar. Historians still argue whether such outlandish stories reflect genuine obscure tactics or simply the public's hunger for mystery. The taller agent introduces himself as Special Agent Clayton Mercer, his voice low and steady, the mark of a man accustomed to commanding scenes more suited to city blocks than country crossroads. His partner, Special Agent Rita Alvarez, produces an engraved badge and a leather binder stamped FBI evidence in gold letters. You imagine the binder's pages filled with every known federal tool, fingerprint cards, ballistic charts, cryptic shorthand of behavioral profiles honed since Lindbergh. Mercer explains to Sheriff Change that the FBI's fingerprint repository now holds over 300,000 entries, an astonishing feat of forensic networking that began in earnest during the Prohibition era. This capacity to compare latent prints across state lines, pioneered by the Bureau in the 1920s, will soon prove invaluable. You follow Mercer and Alvarez as they enter the command center repurposed from the sheriff's break room. Coffee cups clink against saucers on folding tables, maps of Holcomb taped next to grain price charts. A portable fingerprint kit glints under a desk lamp, a canister of black powder, fine brushes like artists' tools, lifting tape ready to capture every ridge. You trace your fingers along a dusty shelf, recalling the meticulous forensic work you witnessed in Section 5, matchbook primer analyses, screw-thread comparisons, all now poised to escalate under federal precision. Mercer unrolls a large aerial photo of the Clutter farm, the grayscale image shifting beneath the lamplight like ancient parchment. Alvarez points to the screen door's hinge mechanism, referencing the broken screw still dusted with flecks of white, evidence of matchbook powder found beneath the latch. The two agents compare notes on the bullet calibers, a .22 long rifle, standard issue for small game hunters but notoriously quiet, chosen here for its stealth. You remember the hushed crack of firearms described in Section 6, now reframed as premeditated selection rather than split-second impulse. The agents' exchange is clinical, almost detached, yet you sense the undercurrent of urgency. A family slaughter demands answers beyond county lines. Outside, the sheriff's deputies ferry in wire baskets of evidence, Laddie's discarded collar, Kenyon's muddied toy soldiers, Bonnie's jam-stained rolling pin. Alvarez photographs each item with a handheld camera, its flash punctuating the room like tiny detonations. You flinch at each burst, feeling the tension ripple across the wooden floors. Then Mercer kneels to dust the doorframe. A precise stroke of the brush reveals a latent print on the interior edge, a slender finger groove too faint for local kits but perfect for FBI analysis. He lifts the print with a strip of clear tape and seals it in a plastic envelope, his gloves whispering against cellophane. It's a painstaking moment, and you lean in, breath held, aware that this single print could bridge the gap between speculation and certainty. Back in the lobby, Alvarez interviews the first witness, a neighbor who reported hearing a child's whimper at dawn. The woman's voice trembles as she recounts the sound, and you watch Alvarez's pen dance across her statement form, each dot and dash transforming raw grief into prosecutable fact. Across the desk, Mercer cross-checks the witness's timeline against phone logs from the small switchboard operator in Garden City, a reminder that even humble operators in remote towns became vital cogs in this emergent federal network. In 1934, the Bureau's coordination with local telegraph lines made it possible to tip off lawmen during the Kansas City massacre. Now, telephone records will help place Dick and Perry miles away when the bodies were discovered. You stroll past a bulletin board plastered with mugshots of known parolees, Dick Hickock's strip in the center, face taut with ambition and bravado. Nearby, Perry Smith's photo shows a lean man with haunted eyes. Agents affix fresh notes beside each, question about firearms purchase, trace travel October 14th to 15th. It's a visual timeline of pursuit, a testament to Hoover's creed, to the end that the criminal may be brought to justice. You recall that creed from Section 3's Quantico war rooms, where maps of bomb sites competed for wall space. Here, markers pinpoint a different kind of terror, murder that felt stranger than any mail bomb. In an adjacent office, Alvarez dispatches telegrams under the header FBI Special Message, each addressed to field offices in Kansas City, Wichita, Oklahoma City. She instructs them to notify banks, armored car services, and bus depots to watch for Hickock and Smith. It's a federal dragnet unfurling across plains and prairies, conceptually modeled on fugitive lists first codified after the 1924 Sutton Hudson kidnapping. As she taps out Morse code on a teleprinter, its rhythmic click pulses like a heartbeat, syncing with your own racing pulse. You rejoin Mercer at the barn where Perry and Dick parked their Mercury. He examines tire tracks, fresh impressions on soft soil, which he measures meticulously with a portable caliper. The depth of the tread and the wheelbase calculation confirm the sedan's make and model. You remember the muddy footprints in Section 7, but now forensic odometry elevates those traces into quantifiable data. Historians still argue whether such technological tools diminish detective intuition or merely augmented it, but here you see their power to shrink the world. A barn in Holcomb becomes the origin point for a mobile manhunt. As day tilts toward afternoon, Alvarez returns to the sheriff's office, her notebook stuffed with depositions from phone operators and gas station attendants. She cross-references license plate sightings with fuel purchase receipts, another bureau innovation since the mid-40s, fusing financial paper trails with physical evidence. Meanwhile, Mercer convenes a briefing. All local lawmen, postal inspectors, highway patrol, and county coroner gather to synchronize efforts. You take a seat at the edge of the meeting table, maps unfurled like ancient battle plans, your name scribbled on a roster of attendees forging unity in tragedy's wake. Finally, Mercer raises his hand and says, "We have a lead on a Mercury matching the description spotted near Minneapolis." You feel the room's collective breath hitch. Minneapolis is 100 miles north, a long reach for two fresh parolees. Yet the agencies nod, resolve hardening. The Clutter case has transcended rural boundaries. It's now a federal priority, a test of the Bureau's mandate to confront violence wherever it lurks. You recall the initial rumblings in Quantico, the heated debates over media embargoes in Section 3, and you recognize that the FBI's entry here marks a turning point. Local tragedy has become national cause. You rise from your chair as agents load evidence into unmarked cars, their engines humming with intent. Outside, the wind stirs the golden cornstalks, whispering through the fields like a warning. You step into the brightness, the fresh air filling your lungs, carrying traces of tobacco smoke, coffee grounds, and steel polish. The sheriff clasps Mercer's shoulder, an unspoken partnership forged in grief and duty. And as you walk away, the echo of teleprinter clicks and camera flashes follows you, a soundtrack to the Bureau's meticulous waltz into Holcomb's broken heart. You slip into the cramped briefing room where case files crowd every surface, the air thick with the odor of stale coffee and anticipation. The FBI's entry in Section 9 promised precision, yet here you witness how even federal might can chase ghosts. In 1930, the Bureau's fingerprint classification system revolutionized identification by giving investigators a way to link suspects across state lines, a fact that underscores just how revolutionary today's leads could be, if they held true. Instead, you watch officers sift through fractured alibis and false leads as if panning for gold in mud. A deputy lays out a timeline on the whiteboard: October 15th, dawn raid, October 16th, body discovery, October 17th, two men matching the Mercury's description seen at a gas station outside Wichita. He points to a grainy photograph from Section 5's forensic sketches, then to a witness statement claiming the suspects hailed from Garden City. The line connecting Garden City to Holcomb wobbles like a drunken thread, every hyperlink in the chain tests the weight of evidence. You lean closer, catching the whisper of a clerk's testimony: they paid cash, asked for directions to the Clutter farm. Yet when agents revisit that gas station, the clerk's memory has faded into confusion. No cash, no questions, just a fleeting silhouette beneath the neon pump light. Fringe rumors later speculated the clerk wasn't a clerk at all but a local prankster claiming to have seen men in dust-covered suits, a tantalizing twist that sent investigators on a wild detour into the town's carnival history. Historians still argue whether such outlandish tips reflect community folklore or deliberate misdirection, but you sense that every misfire here deepened the Clutter case's labyrinth. Across the table, Agent Alvarez pages through bus manifests from Garden City's Greyhound Depot. She notes a Perry Smith listed for a September departure, except the manifest's ink smears, rendering his name as Perry Smith. You almost laugh at the absurd misspelling, a tiny quirk that might have foiled a computer search had such tools existed then. Instead, they transcribe the name by hand, cross-checking with jail records until dawn. You remember Nancy's lost diary rumor from Section 2, an artifact that never surfaced, and realize how often truth drifts beyond reach when facts get tangled in transcription errors. In a side room, Mercer and Alvarez examine a stack of utility bills found in Perry's suitcase. One is addressed to R. Hickock in Kansas City, except the extra C in his surname betrays a sloppy alias. You recall their detailed sketches of the Clutter homestead in Section 3, drawn with surgical care, yet here their basic paperwork unravels with a misplaced letter. The contrast feels bitter, brilliant premeditation undermined by pedestrian carelessness. A clerk's ledger confirms no Hickock ever lived at that address, but the error cost precious hours as agents chased a non-existent tenant. You drift toward a map pinned with colored pushpins denoting reported Mercury sightings. One pin marks Minot, North Dakota, an impossible leap for two men without clear motive. A witness there described a car matching the suspects, only to recant days later, claiming he'd been mistaking his reflection in the window. The FBI's teletype messages buzz with corrections and clarifications, an electronic chorus of starts and stops. In 1956, police in Chicago discovered how unreliable eyewitness testimony could be after misidentifying suspects in a bank robbery, prompting widespread studies on memory. Here, in Holcomb, that lesson resurfaces. Memory proves as slippery as cornstalks in morning mist. A fresh tip arrives via telegram. A waitress in a Wichita diner recalls two men matching Smith and Hickock's descriptions, eating breakfast under the sign home of the pancake breakfast. She mentions they paid in small bills, pocketed a waitress's scratch ticket for tips, and joked about striking it rich soon. Yet when you check the diner's ledger, there's no record of scratch ticket orders, only coffee cups and bacon plates. You sense the diner's back booth holds one more crucial clue, but the memory of that waitress feels as elusive as the echo of Bonnie's laughter in Section 2. A sergeant wheels in a film strip, grainy Polaroid shots from a highway patrol camera capturing a Mercury bearing Hickock's dented fender near a rural crossroads. The images flicker in the projector's beam, a flicker of taillight, the curve of a roof, a license plate half obscured by dust. It's the first solid visual thread linking the suspects to the region, melting the ice of rumor. You recall Section 7's detail of Kenyon's muddy footprints, physical traces that, unlike memories, can't be denied. History tells us that in 1910, New York City detectives first used systematic surveillance photography to crack a ring of jewel thieves. This small highway snapshot carries that legacy forward. Still, every new lead seems shadowed by doubt. They chased the Mercury to a junkyard in Salina, only to find it crushed and impounded months earlier. Fingerprints lifted from the steering wheel match a mechanic named M. Johnston, not Perry, but an unfortunate soul's, yet his alibi checks out. The mistaken identity forces agents to backtrack through Section 4's false tip origins, retracing every step Dick and Perry took on their frantic road trip. Each dead end tightens the coils of frustration around the task force. You wander into a hallway where a bulletin board holds a single faded postcard, a washed-out image of a palm tree, scrawled "Wish you were here, DNH." The only clues, a partial postmark from Los Angeles and a smudge where Dick's return address should be. It's a remnant of their dream of palm-lined escape, a haunting whisper of California sunshine that never materialized. Fringe enthusiasts pounce on the card, claiming it hints at a hidden hideout down south, but federal money trails show no withdrawals in that region. You slip the postcard back into its evidence sleeve, aware that hope and hysteria dance hand in hand in criminal investigations. Finally, Mercer calls for a break as midday bleeds into afternoon. You step into the hallway, the hum of the air conditioner a lifeline amid the growing tension. Deputies cluster around a radio, waiting for updates on interstate broadcasts. You recall Section 8's community vigil, how shared grief galvanized prayer and purpose. Here, the investigators lean into shared purpose too, their fatigue tempered by the conviction that even fractured alibis will eventually reveal truth. In the break room, you pour yourself a fresh cup of coffee, stronger this time, and savor its comforting bitterness. Outside the window, cornstalks sway in wind-borne halos, indifferent to human toil. You sit and let the warmth seep into your bones, steeling yourself for the next revelation. Somewhere beyond those fields, a piece of paper, a smudged fingerprint, or a single witness will tip the scales. You close your eyes for a moment, recalling the Clutter's welcoming home in Section 2, the killer's misguided faith in a phantom fortune in Section 4, and the jigsaw of suspect movements that brought you here. Then your phone buzzes, breakthrough in Minneapolis. It's the moment every false lead led toward. You rise, gripping your coffee cup like an anchor, heart thumping with renewed resolve. The map before you unfurls once more, pushpins illuminated by afternoon sun. The fractured mosaic of clues is shifting into focus, and you step back into the briefing room, ready to turn rumor into resolution. You slip into the hushed fluorescence of the Minneapolis crime lab, the click of your heels echoing against steel counters strewn with evidence bags. The city's icy breath presses against the frosted windows, a stark contrast to the heat of anticipation pulsing through every agent and technician gathered here. In 1931, the premiere of ballistics fingerprinting after the Reed murder demonstrated how matching grooves on bullets could transform bullets into witnesses. Now, in late 1959, a similar forensic leap is about to crack the Clutter case wide open. Inside, a forensic technician named Marjorie Latham carefully pours a fine cadmium sulfide powder over the battered trigger guard of a .22 pistol recovered from a Mill City pawnshop. It's the same caliber used in the Clutter murders, and its acquisition under the alias R. Hickock first hinted these men could be our suspects. As the powder settles into the metal's microscopic ridges, latent fingerprints emerge in stark relief, prints thought impossible to lift from such tarnished, pitted surfaces only a decade ago. You recall that in 1947, the FBI first adapted chemical fuming techniques to preserve prints on greasy surfaces, a breakthrough that has now evolved into these near-magical powders. Latham's gloved finger traces the delicate loops and whorls now visible on the pistol's frame. She murmurs that the pattern matches a set on file from a Kansas City burglary arrest, Richard Hickok's juvenile mug shot prints preserved in the Bureau's catalog. You lean closer, the world narrowing to these ridges and valleys mapping a man's identity. Fringe enthusiasts later speculated these prints contained hidden subdermal valves, an absurd claim of biometric encryption, but the science here is straightforward. Skin oil interacts with metal to leave a faithful mirror of its owner's ridges. At a back table, Special Agent Alvarez compares the Clutter home's recovered bullet fragments, torn steel with etched rifling marks, to the rifling signature test fired from this Minneapolis pistol. The patterns line up in a seamless match, 6 right-hand grooves, 120 grooves per inch twist, unique enough that forensic ballistics textbooks cite this combination as exceedingly rare. Historians still argue whether early ballistics methods achieved courtroom reliability or risked confirmation bias, but here the match rings true, snapping the case into sharper focus than any rumor-laden tip could. Meanwhile, Agent Mercer reviews an interview transcript with a Minneapolis pawnshop owner who recalls the man trading the pistol, a lanky stranger who insisted on cash and refused a receipt. In the transcript's margins you spot Mercer's handwritten note, voice described as soft with a Midwest drawl. It's a small detail but crucial, linking the stranger's speech patterns to Perry Smith's gravelly mutter, recorded by a cross-state toll operator when he placed a collect call from Minneapolis. Voice identification has roots in the 1920s telephone analysis labs, where operators first noted distinctive twangs and hesitations. Now, these auditory fingerprints offer another thread tying Perry to the crime. You wander to the corner where a blinking reel-to-reel recorder spins. It holds the toll operator's recording, its hiss and pop echoing like distant thunder. Agent Alvarez plays it for the team, a hesitant voice asking, "Is this capital city switch?" The accent's cadence matches Smith's tone, the same elongated vowels you heard in his recorded prison interviews. Fringe theorists once argued that ambient background noise in such tapes could contain secret messages, like faint horns signaling a getaway, or that Smith used a whispering fetish to cloak his identity, but investigators keep it simple. Matching voice prints bolsters ballistic matches and prints on file. Across the room, a federal fingerprint examiner unfurls an enlarged photograph of Perry's palm print lifted from the Clutter kitchen's counter edge. Its deep creases align perfectly with the raised lines of the Minneapolis print. You step closer, noticing the tiny scar on Perry's thenar crease, a childhood knife injury he once tried to burn away with a cigarette, according to a Fringe memoir. The scar remains etched in forensic records, a stubborn marker that helped corroborate the latent prints. Historians still argue whether palm prints hold as much evidentiary weight as fingerprints, given their softer ridges, but here they prove decisive. The lab's phone rings, cutting through the charged silence. Alvarez picks up and listens for a moment, her face softening as she relays news. The pawnshop owner will testify he swore it was Hickock's voice. You feel a collective exhale, anticipation giving way to near-certain resolution. The final piece is falling into place: ballistics, fingerprints, voice analysis, all steering toward the two men whose shadows you've traced from Holcomb to Wichita to Minneapolis. You step outside for fresh air, the Minnesotan chill sharpening your pulse. The city thrums with life beyond these walls, streetcars clattering over tracks, dog walkers pulling small breeds against the cold. Yet here, in the crime lab's greenhouse of evidence, reality condenses into clear lines: Richard Dick Hickock's juvenile prints, Perry Smith's voice, the murder weapon once stashed under a pawnshop counter. Together, they form a nexus impossible to deny. Back inside, Mercer convenes a conference call with agents in Denver and Omaha. They plan stakeouts, bus stations, Greyhound depots, airline ticket counters, anywhere the fugitives might try to flee further west or north. The Bureau's cross-state network kicks into gear, reimagining Prohibition-era rum-runner pursuit techniques for these two desperate men. You recall Section 3's prison cell meeting and Section 5's smoky bar scheming, their road trips romance exposed under fluorescent lab lights, the fantasy unraveling in reams of scientific data. In a corner, you find a weathered journal seized from Perry's suitcase, its pages filled with stream-of-consciousness poetry and sketches of storm-lashed ships. Mercer flips to a page where Smith drew a cabin under pines, an uncanny echo of the Clutter farmhouse footprint. He murmurs, he's been rehearsing this ending in ink. You nod, recalling the fringiest rumor of all, that Perry believed the murders would crown him a martyr of injustice, that his art sought immortality in violence. Whether that quixotic belief drove him or masked deeper trauma, the manuscript now serves as both confession and manifesto. As evening twilight seeps into the lab, Alvarez prints out color-coded charts of ballistic matches and call time-stamped phone logs. Agents begin loading the final binders into vinyl cases. Tomorrow they'll present this packet to federal magistrates and secure arrest warrants. You feel the careful tension ease into the satisfaction of closure, a mosaic of forensic victory assembled from stray fingerprints, fractured bullets, and fleeting phone calls. You pack your notes and leave the lab, the clang of metal doors behind you. On the street, neon signs flicker over empty sidewalks, promising jazz clubs and late-night diners. You walk past them, mind alive with the lab's rhythmic percussion, camera flashes capturing prints, projectors humming slide matches, tape reels whispering voices. Each sound was a step toward justice, each click a nail in the killer's flight path. As you climb into your car, you glance back at the lab's steely silhouette. The breakthroughs in Minneapolis have done their work, rumor and rumor's empty promise shattered under the weight of method and science. Tomorrow, two men who once believed themselves ghost riders will learn the full force of accountability, guided here by forensic ghosts who let no trace remain unseen. You step through the heavy oak doors of the Finney County Courthouse on a crisp morning, the marble floors reflecting your own anxious reflection as you prepare to witness the drama unfold. In 1925, the Scopes monkey trial first showed America how courts could become stages for national culture wars, and today's proceedings in Garden City promise a spectacle of moral conflict and legal maneuvering. Here, Perry Smith and Richard Hickock stand side by side, their shoulders squared, their expressions unreadable, as whispering spectators crowd the wooden benches. You settle into a hardback chair in the gallery, aware that every drawn breath you take mingles with the weight of fate about to be decided. The judge, a trim figure in a black robe, raps his gavel with quiet authority. His father once served as a county prosecutor during the infamous 1907 Claflin murder retrial, a pioneering case in forensic chemistry that introduced early blood analysis methods to Kansas courts. Now, in Section 12, that same bench will weigh the lives of two men blamed for 4 murders, testing both precedent and principle. The courtroom hush magnifies the rustle of papers as the prosecutor rises, sliding a thick file toward the jury. He lays out his narrative in calm, measured tones. At dawn on October 15, Smith and Hickock invaded the Clutter home, executed 4 innocent people under the false promise of hidden cash, and fled in cold calculation. He references ballistic reports and fingerprint matches from Minneapolis, weaving each piece of evidence into an unbreakable chain. You watch his lips move, recognizing the power of narrative in a venue more accustomed to land disputes and probate hearings. When the defense attorney stands, he wears a charcoal suit that wrinkles only at the elbows. He begins with an acknowledgement of tragedy, lives ended with horrific swiftness and senseless cruelty. Then he pivots, describing Perry's fractured upbringing and Dick's abandoned ambitions, painting them less as monsters than as products of indifference and desperation. You notice a quiver in his voice as he quotes from a psychiatrist's report. Smith displays chronic dissociative episodes accompanied by auditory hallucinations. Historians still argue whether introducing early psychiatric testimony like this in 1959 enhanced fairness or muddied jurors' grasp of concrete facts, but you sense the judge's curiosity at the mention of minds broken by trauma. Throughout opening arguments, you feel the jury's focus shift like sunlight through stained glass. Some jurors lean forward, noting the forensic exhibits, others glance at Perry's sketchbook, rumored to contain watercolors of wrecked ships, a fringe detail many dismissed as fantasy but which here underscores a tortured soul. The courtroom's air grows heavy with expectation, each heartbeat drumming a tacit question: will compassion or conviction prevail? Next, witnesses take the stand. A sheriff's deputy testifies to the grim discovery of the bodies, voice steady as he recounts seeing Herbert Clutter's lifeless form sprawled like a fallen oak. You recall the hushed scenes from Section 7, those silent rooms frozen in time. When the deputy mentions Kenyon's overturned toy tractors, your chest tightens, a visceral response to innocence violated. On cross-examination, the defense attorney probes memory's fallibility. Earlier, in 1941, the Lindbergh kidnapping investigation revealed how eyewitness accounts could diverge wildly, yet this deputy's recollection remains consistent in every telling, lending his words undeniable weight. Then comes the moment that sends a ripple through the courtroom. The defense calls a clinical psychologist. She speaks softly, adjusting her glasses as she describes Perry's chronic nightmares of drowning and his tendency to dissociate under stress. In 1843, the landmark Emnaden rule first codified the insanity defense, stating that a defendant must not understand the nature or wrongfulness of his actions. Here, the psychologist argues that Smith's grip on reality fractured more than once. A murmur rolls through the gallery as she concedes that while Perry planned the murders, his volition may have been compromised by overwhelming delusions. You feel the tension in the air, the collision of medical nuance and legal doctrine. The prosecutor pounces on the term planning, arguing that Perry's meticulous blueprints, those sketches you traced in Section 5, demonstrate a mind entirely capable of forethought. Yet the defense counters with the specter of Perry's childhood traumas, beatings from a stepfather, years in juvenile detention, suggesting his cruelty sprang from unhealed wounds rather than pure malice. Historians still argue whether such mental health defenses offer justice or excuse violence, and today you sense both fervent conviction and uneasy doubt at every bench. The proceeding slows as family members are ushered in for victim impact statements. Bonnie Clutter's sister stands, voice trembling, recalling Sunday services led by Herbert and the smell of Nancy's violets in her bedroom. You recall those pressed wildflowers from Section 2, now a painful echo of life halted too soon. The judge's gavel never falls. This is narrative, not adjudication, but you feel the emotional verdict being rendered in each tearful gaze. As testimonies wane, attorneys deliver their closing arguments. The prosecutor strips away sympathy's veneer, reminding jurors that legal standards hinge on accountability. Insanity cannot be an escape hatch for brutal violence, he asserts, voice crisp as paper. The defense's final plea is quieter but no less urgent. We ask you to weigh not only the chapters of horror but the lifetime of suffering that wrote them. You sense the jury's collective exhale as they prepare to retire behind the sealed doors. When the bailiff dismisses them, the hush returns deeper than before. You rise, heart pulsing, aware that the community's faith in justice now rests on 9 ordinary citizens, and on the law's capacity to balance compassion with consequence. As you step into the hallway lined with dark wood panels, you breathe in that mix of cedar and anticipation, ready to confront the final measurement of guilt and mercy. You step out of the hushed claustrophobia of the courtroom into the late afternoon sun, the weight of verdict still settling like dust on your shoulders. In 1974, the notorious Manson family trial taught America how media spectacle can overshadow sober justice, and now reflections on Perry Smith and Dick Hickock's fates ripple through Holcomb's deserted streets. You feel echoes of that trial's chaos as community members debate whether mental illness defenses in domestic terrorism cases open a Pandora's box of excuses, or mandating compassion. Inside your mind plays the newsreel montage of Smith's haunted eyes on the stand, juxtaposed with Hickock's bravado fading to defiance under cross-examination. The jury's deliberation, brief yet measured, culminated in death sentences for both men, a twin echo of the electric chair verdicts once handed down in the Sacco and Vanzetti case of 1927, where public outrage over perceived injustice blazed worldwide. Historians still argue whether capital punishment in high-profile cases serves as deterrent or merely perpetuates state-sanctioned vengeance, but here the community's thirst for accountability seemed to tip the scales decisively. You wander past the county jail where Hickock first glimpsed freedom's horizon, the same walls that would seal their fates. A fringe rumor clung for years that Smith and Hickock considered impersonating utility workers to sidestep lockups, a fanciful myth no prison record corroborates, yet one that flourished in barroom lore. The truth, as Walter Cronkite would intone on the evening news, proved stranger than any hearsay: two men bound by desperation, now bound for death row. At the diner where reporters once trailed them, you sip a black coffee as locals debate the fairness of insanity defenses. One patron insists that Smith's fractured psyche merited life imprisonment and treatment, another argues that Hickock's calculated cruelty deserved no mercy. You recall how in 1962, the insanity acquittal of John Hinckley Jr. spurred the Insanity Defense Reform Act of 1984, legislation reflecting society's unease at excusing violence on psychiatric grounds. Tonight, their stories feed that ongoing debate: can trauma mitigate guilt, or must justice remain unyielding? As dusk falls, you drift to the memorial where wildflowers cluster beneath flickering lanterns. The names Herbert, Bonnie, Nancy, Kenyon hover in candlelight, soft and reverent. You remember how Bonnie's locket and Nancy's violin bow were presented as victim impact, small tokens anchoring grief in personal artifacts. Now, discussions swirl about restoring the Clutter home as a museum dedicated to both their lives and the lessons learned, a proposal that some embrace as tribute and others reject as macabre tourism. Historians still argue whether such sites honor memory or exploit tragedy, but you sense Holcomb's struggle to balance remembrance with respect. In the hush between passing cars you catch yourself humming Amazing Grace, the same hymn raised in that Section 8 vigil. Its notes drift across fields once humming with harvest winds, now silent witnesses to irrevocable loss. You close your eyes, imagining Herbert's booming voice leading a congregation, Bonnie's gentle voice in harmony, Nancy's violin entwining with the psalm, and Kenyon's tender laughter under the chapel roof. Their presence endures in memory's echo, a chorus too tender for oblivion. As night deepens, you walk the farm road one last time. Corn rustles under a moonless sky, and the farmhouse's silhouette stands stark against velvet dusk. You carry with you the complexity of justice pursued, ballistic matches in Minneapolis, mental health pleas in Garden City, media fervor in Section 8, and the scholarly debates spanning decades. In their place, a single truth remains: for lives lost, two lives condemned, and a world forever altered by choices made in prison bars and roadside bars alike. You pause at the gate where it all began, fingers lingering on the latch. The echo of that first snap in Section 1 returns, a reminder that small moments can cascade into monumental consequences. And as you close the gate behind you, you carry forward a final reflection: that every act of violence, every twist of fate, intersects with human frailty and the relentless quest for meaning that follows, beckoning each new generation to weigh mercy against justice, compassion against consequence, and, ultimately, the fragile balance between darkness and light. You walk into the hushed hush of a Senate hearing room, its high ceilings and polished wood panels amplifying every low murmur. The Clutter case has now taken on a national dimension, no longer merely a rural tragedy, but a catalyst for debates that stretch from Kansas farmhouses to the marble corridors of Washington, D.C. In 1930, the Senate's McNary Committee first investigated Prohibition-era crime, debating whether federal law could stem widespread bootlegging. Now, nearly 3 decades later, the Clutter murders have revived questions about parole, capital punishment, and the very mechanics of forensic science. You slide into a seat among observers as senators in tailored suits settle behind a long dais, nameplates gleaming under the lights. A placard reads Committee on Criminal Justice Reform. You recall that early legislative bodies rarely examined forensic methods. The 1910 Mann Act hearings barely touched on evidence collection. But today's witnesses include FBI agents, state prosecutors, and even a bereaved neighbor from Holcomb whose voice still trembles when she speaks of Nancy's violin bow. You sense the weight of personal testimony mingling with policy proposals, a heady mix of grief and governance. First to testify is Special Agent Clayton Mercer, recalling how Minneapolis ballistics breakthroughs in Section 11 matched that pawnshop pistol to the Clutter murders. He explains how expanding federal funding for crime labs could bring such precision to every county seat, not just urban centers. In 1959, he says, there were only 75 crime labs in the entire country. Today, local sheriffs rely on rudimentary fingerprint kits. Historians still argue whether federal standardization diminishes local autonomy or fosters essential uniformity, but Mercer's earnest delivery underscores how the Clutter case exposed glaring forensic gaps. Next, Dr. Elaine Morris, the forensic psychiatrist from Section 12, describes the thorny issue of mental health defenses. She urges senators to consider parole reforms. Perry Smith's chronic dissociative episodes illustrate that we must integrate psychiatric treatment into sentencing, not merely punish. A fringe contingent in the gallery clutches pamphlets demanding no leniency for killers, echoing fear-driven calls from radio talk shows in Section 8. Yet Morris's calm precision brings the debate back to nuance. Can rehabilitation coexist with retribution? You lean forward, recalling how Bonnie's locket and Nancy's wildflower ritual symbolized mercy in the face of violence. A senator taps his pen pensively, the sound sharp in the silence, before addressing the next issue, capital punishment. He cites the 1925 Buck v. Davis decision that upheld the death penalty for heinous crimes, noting how public opinion shifted after the Clutter case. Polls commissioned in late 1959 found 68% of Americans supporting execution for multiple murders, a mainstream fact that still resonates. Yet the senator wonders aloud whether state-sanctioned death truly deters crime or merely echoes violence back at society. You see jaws tighten on either side of the aisle, a familiar tug-of-war between justice and mercy. Then comes an unexpected voice, Bonnie Clutter's cousin, her soft Kansas accent carrying through the room, describing the community's long road to healing. She recounts how Holcomb's early sorrow evolved into advocacy for victim support programs and local youth counseling, spurred by fear that unaddressed trauma could breed new violence. Fringe advocates once claimed her family's forgiveness bordered on fanaticism, a sensational rumor dismissed by historians who highlight the remarkable resilience it embodies. Now her testimony reminds you of small-town strength, that policy must honor both prevention and remembrance. The hearings shift to parole. A state corrections official outlines parole board challenges, limited psychiatric staff, overcrowded prisons, and a patchwork of state guidelines. He references the parole escape of a 1947 bank robber due to lax mental evaluations, a cautionary tale illustrating systemic weaknesses. Senators debate whether to federalize parole standards or bolster state autonomy. You recall Section 4's ill-fated prison tip that ignited the murders, wondering if better parole oversight could have intercepted Hickock's fantasies, or if fate moved beyond bureaucratic checks. As the afternoon light slants through the windows, you catch the last panel's focus on forensic education. A forensic chemist from the FBI's lab proposes a scholarship fund for rural sheriffs to attend advanced training, invoking the tiny flecks of matchbook primer in Section 5 as proof that microscopic details can topple cases. He argues for mobile crime labs that can travel to county fairs and 4-H meetings, teaching local volunteers how to preserve evidence, an echo of Herbert Clutter's cooperative farming workshops that once united Holcomb's community. Historians still argue whether such outreach risks civilian interference or fosters civic vigilance, but the proposal brims with promise. Finally, a senator rises to propose an omnibus bill, the Clutter Act for Forensic and Legal Reform. It would mandate minimum forensic standards, integrate mental health into sentencing, and fund victim support services nationwide. He pauses to name Nancy and Kenyon directly, two young lives that stared death down at dawn. We owe them more than remembrance, he intones. We owe them a system that honors every life with precision, compassion, and unwavering justice. You exhale, the hearing winding down as aides distribute copies of the proposed bill. In the electric hum of departing conversations, you reflect on the journey from whispered prison rumors in Section 4, through forensic epiphanies in Section 11, to courtroom reckonings in Section 12, each chapter laid bare before the Senate's gaze. The legislative theater you've witnessed closes with hope and uncertainty entwined, hope that policy can rise from tragedy, uncertainty that any reform can fully shield the innocent. Stepping onto the Capitol steps, you feel the dusk's chill and the weight of responsibility on your shoulders. The cornfields of Kansas lie miles away, but their echoes, the laughter lost, the instruments silenced, the families forever changed, ring out here in marble halls. You clutch your notes as you descend the steps, carrying both the bitter lessons and the tentative promise of justice renewed in the Clutter Act's pages. And as you slip into the twilight, you sense that Section 15's reflections on cultural legacy will be richer for this legislative crucible, a final testament to the power of policy, fueled by 4 fallen lives and the unrelenting pursuit of truth. You wander along the weathered fence line at dusk, golden cornfields swaying like applause for a story told time and again, and feel the hush settle around you. Truman Capote's In Cold Blood first hit shelves in 1966, selling over 4 million copies in its first year, a watershed moment that transformed true crime into a literary phenomenon and made the Clutter murders an everlasting echo in American culture. Historians still argue whether blending novelistic flair with journalistic rigor risks straining the bounds of truth or forged a new paradigm in nonfiction, but you sense that Capote's pioneering spirit courses through every modern crime podcast and documentary series. You close your eyes and hear the gentle click of Capote's tape recorder, its hiss and pop, a mechanical heartbeat capturing Perry Smith's confessions and Dick Hickock's bravado, recordings many fringe voices claimed contained secret admissions now lost to folklore, fueling rumors of hidden reels locked in private archives. Though no one outside of Capote's inner circle has ever substantiated those tapes, their legend underscores the story's mystique, a manuscript as much myth as memoir, its truths blurred by artful retelling. In the years since, true crime has exploded across platforms. Podcasts like Serial and My Favorite Murder accrue millions of listens each week, building on Capote's template of immersive narrative. Mainstream fact, by 2019, true crime podcasts made up over 50% of the top 20 podcast charts, illustrating how audiences crave the blend of empathy and intrigue first popularized in Holcomb's quiet fields. You imagine listeners huddled with earbuds at midnight, tracing the same gravel lanes you walked in Section 1, ears straining for footsteps in the dark. Academic circles, too, haven't let the story rest. You recall Section 12's courtroom drama, now dissected in criminal justice seminars debating the efficacy of the insanity defense. Capote's portrayal of Smith's fractured psyche still sparks heated debate. Some scholars argue his empathetic lens humanized a killer's trauma, while others warn it risked excusing violence under the guise of artistry. Historians still argue whether Capote's revisions, his poetic license, enhanced our understanding of motive or blurred the line between fact and creative conjecture. The Clutter farmhouse itself has become a landmark of pilgrimage. You see flickering candlelight through its windows as visitors whisper that the house's ghostly atmosphere inspired Capote's prose. Fringe enthusiasts claim that on silent autumn nights you can hear Nancy's violin drifting across the fields, though skeptics dismiss it as corn rustling in the wind. That spectral melody, real or imagined, reminds you how stories can animate the still air, weaving the living and the dead into a shared tapestry of memory. In museums dedicated to crime history, recreated scenes of the Clutter parlor, complete with overturned furniture and a replica violin case, stand alongside exhibits on Jack the Ripper's Whitechapel letters and the Samson and Delilah safes tampering in Prohibition-era Chicago. Those displays underscore a mainstream fact: the enduring power of physical artifacts in true crime, whether bullet fragments or blood-stained letters, can anchor narratives in visceral reality. You remember the bullet matching in Section 11, its rifling signature forever linking a pawnshop pistol to 4 lost lives. Online, the Clutter murders inhabit endless forums where amateur detectives debate minute details. Did Perry's sketches in Section 5 foreshadow his downfall? Was Dick's carnival ring in Section 8 a superstition or a talisman of arrogance? Some threads spiral into conspiracy, claiming the Kellerman heirs secretly reclaimed the Clutter saga, or that Capote omitted key evidence at the behest of powerful friends. While these fringe theories rarely hold up under scrutiny, they testify to the story's gravitational pull, every rumor a new point of light in the constellation of collective fascination. You walk past a cafe named Cold Blood Coffee, its neon letters flickering over a menu of cappuccinos and crime scene latte art. Neighborhood book clubs host monthly discussions on Capote's prose, layering new interpretations over the original narrative. You overhear patrons debate whether the death penalty imposed on Smith and Hickock, a harsh mainstream response echoing 1930s Sacco and Vanzetti executions, offered closure or perpetuated cycles of state violence. Historians still argue whether capital punishment in such cases seals justice or stokes further division. Academic press releases tout recent forensic advances, digital reconstruction of Capote's original notes, spectral imaging of his manuscript edits, aimed at unveiling lost passages. A handful of intrepid scholars claim they detected Capote's marginalia hinting at an alternative ending, a quirky detail reminiscent of Bonnie's secret diary rumor in Section 2. Though no archival consensus has emerged, the pursuit fuels the enduring scholarly debate: can new technology ever fully resurrect the past, or does the imprecision of history leave some truths forever buried? As night deepens, you step onto the stone steps of a university lecture hall, hearing students dissect in cold blood under pools of warm lamplight. They map the Clutter's ordinary virtues, Herbert's community leadership, Bonnie's grandmotherly charm, Nancy's shy artistry, Kenyon's playful innocence, against the killer's fractured psyches in a mosaic of narrative tension. Their analysis extends from sociological contexts, post-war rural decline, juvenile justice failures, to ethical quandaries. Does consuming true crime risk commodifying suffering, or can it foster empathy through reckonings with our darkest impulses? You pause at a window overlooking the campus quad. Leaves drift across the pathway in silent arcs, like pages turning in an endless book. You sense the lineage connecting Section 1's Harvest Moon to Section 14's Final Reflections, a story that transcends its bloody roots to explore universal themes: violence and mercy, memory and mythology, the fragile boundary between innocence and transgression. True crime, Capote showed, is more than sensationalism, it is a mirror held up to the human soul, warts and all. You descend the steps beneath a vault of stars, air crisp with the promise of revelation. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, perhaps echoing Laddie's lonely call from Section 7. You breathe deeply, carrying the weight of every section's narrative: the gothic suspense of Section 6's raid, the communal grief of Section 8, the federal machinery of Section 9, the forensic triumphs in Section 11, the courtroom's moral reckoning in Section 12, the cultural resonance now weaving through Section 13's twilight, and the layered analysis of Section 14. Now, in Section 15, you grasp how a single book and a single crime have rippled through decades, shaping how we tell stories, seek justice, and confront our own capacity for darkness. And as you step beyond the campus gates into the silent night, you carry with you the enduring legacy of the Clutter family and the narrative that breathes new life into their memory, a legacy that reminds us all: stories live on long after the echoes of violence fade, guiding us toward both understanding and healing. You settle into the soft hush of your space, the day's weight lifting as a gentle calm unfurls around you. Allow your shoulders to loosen and your breath to deepen, inviting serenity to ripple through each limb. Recall the Clutter family's kindness, the warmth of their farmhouse, the hum of Bonnie's hymns, Nancy's music echoing in memory, little Kenyon's laughter chasing the dog under autumn skies. Let those tender flashes of light weave through the darker shadows, reminding you that hope persists even in the face of sorrow. As your eyes grow heavy, envision the cornfields at dusk, golden stalks swaying in slow rhythm, whispering lullabies carried on a cool breeze. Sense the quiet solidarity of the community, their shared grief transformed into enduring unity. Embrace the stillness, like a soft quilt wrapping you in gentle comfort. In this liminal space between wakefulness and dreams, allow the echoes of truth, both harrowing and heartwarming, to settle into soft insight. Recognize that understanding can soothe as much as it reveals, and that even the darkest tales can guide you back toward light. Now, drift into restorative silence, each breath a tender bridge to peace. Rest well, knowing that stories, like stars, shine brightest in the night's embrace. Good night, and may your dreams be soft whirls of calm light. Sweet dreams.